What's up, preppers? Welcome back to another video today about the origins of prepping, or more so the term and where it comes from. So, the origins of the whole prepper movement, we've said it many a times on the channel, and other channels say the same thing, that prepping's been around for a very long time. It might not have been called prepping, but people had a pantry of food. Older generations did that as part of the norm. However, we tend to be more prepared than most people when it comes to this kind of philosophy. So for these early groups of people, preparedness was simply part of everyday life. And it wasn't until conveniences such as supermarkets, mass-produced goods were readily available for everybody, and your one-click buys and your same-day deliveries, and that become the norm. So then stockpiling food and having a pantry of food became not the norm as such, and so that was what became what we know today as preppers. The main prepper movement starts around the 50s, when the Cold War created mass paranoia across the US and across Europe. More so in the US, obviously, with the Cuban Missile Crisis going on. But during the 50s, the Cold War with Russia was going strong, and the Americans really did believe that a nuclear bomb could drop at any moment. The US government encouraged citizens to build fallout shelters and run bomb drills as part of people's daily lives. You'll have seen the clips and the footage where it says like duck and cover, and kids getting under the desks and covering the head. All sorts like that was getting them prepared. On top of this, a series of recessions hit, and one investment advisor, Harry Brown, started giving seminars on how to survive monetary collapse. The sense of fear which characterized these decades can be seen in the Don Stevens 1967 book, Retreater's Bibliography, which he encouraged people to build and survive a survival retreat in a remote location. He coined the term retreater. He outlined tactics such as recycling materials, using renewable energy, and these are the same things that we discuss as preppers today. In the 70s and 80s, retreaters and survivalists was what we were called, what preppers were called. In 1975, the author Kirk Saxon began writing a newsletter called The Survivor. In the publication, he talked about pioneer skills, early technologies. He is often credited with coining the term survivalist. In the 70s, the term survivalist and retreater were often used interchangeably. However, they soon began to differentiate, and survivalist became associated with more combative style of preparedness so people really combat orientated and getting the weapons, homemade weapons, including homemade things such as bombs. So obviously you can see where that stigma came from. By contrast, a retreater was someone who tried to avoid conflict and became invisible, basically grey man kind of thing. Numerous other books were out about the economic collapse, disaster preparedness, and published during that decade. And by the 1980s, survivalism had become a multi-billion-dollar industry. In addition to books and expos for survivalist equipment started in the 80s, and this flooded across America through this time. We kind of had the trickle-down effect in the UK. It's not so much that it was just happening there, but everything that seems to happen there does trickle over here eventually, and it sort of comes over in a smaller proportion. By the 1990s, these movements had split. Survivalists were considered to be very right-wing conservatives with radical anti-government sentiments. These negative connotations were only reinforced by a series of events linked to survivalist groups, such as the siege on Ruby Ridge in 1992, the siege on the Waco compound in 1993, and the terrorist attack by Timothy McVeigh in 1995, all of which was related to the word survivalists. The Y2K scare slightly revived the survivalist movement. However, when the scare turned out to be not a scare at all, it only reinforced the idea that survivalists and retreaters were extreme and their beliefs were unfounded. And, you know, that's where we starting getting tinfoil hat names thrown at us. So interestingly enough, by 2001, things started to change, because if you did a Google search in 2000, you'd find zero results using the term prepper. However, in 2001, things were starting to appear, and the word prepper had popped up several times on websites. And then the preppers started to make their own name for themselves and started to build up, that it kind of took over from what the retreater was, less than the survivalist. Obviously, with things going on, the terrorist attack in 9/11 took Americans massively by surprise, and it did for all of us across all the world, watching on our TV screens as well, thinking, wow, how could that happen in the heart of a country like that? Suddenly, authorities were instructing people over there to stockpile duct tape, make disaster kits, and be ready to evacuate at any time. These were things that survivalists and retreaters had been preaching for years, and their fears had suddenly been confirmed, and survivalist warnings were now being echoed by authorities. So you start to get the people going, yeah, we were right the whole time, we were right all along. Which, yeah, in a way you were. Maybe not to the extreme you're thinking, but you were. The need to prepare was once again reinforced by events like Hurricane Katrina, the Great Recession. Over the first decade of the 21st century, preparedness went from being something associated with extremism to a patriotic duty in America. By 2010, polls showed that 50% of Americans were thinking about preparedness, and an increase from 18% in 2004. I do not have percentage figures for that in the UK at this time. I'm hoping to get some more numbers, but I do know over the last 10 years, it has become more and more of a thing over here. 2010 onwards, preppers go mainstream. Why is that? Of course, we have the Doomsday Prepper TV series and survivalist TV series all really landing on everyone's TVs across the world. Preppers don't isolate themselves in preparation for Armageddon as such. Instead, they keep normal lives and relaxed view about prepping and pending disasters. And it's like hope for the best, prepare for the worst, somewhere in the middle. But obviously on these TV shows for ratings, they showed the extreme side of all of that. Okay, they showed the people that maybe had one too many screws out, and they weren't, in my opinion, preppers, and they were more of this extreme survivalist genre. Another article from 2010 entitled Rise of the Preppers, Survivalists Get a Makeover makes it clear that preppers aren't just another group of paranoid doomsdayers. They're mostly focused on natural disasters and things like that. Things that you just want to be prepared for. It's in the name, right? In the following years, the prepping movement experienced a huge boom with the TV programs, like we said, which did show the extreme vision of a prepper culture, which did help the movement, as in pushed more people to look it up, but it also didn't help with the fact that these were the extremes of them people. And it was always somebody that you'd look at thinking, you are not prepared, or you are not, you think about your health first. There was all sorts. Most preppers would have pulled them episodes apart themselves. The term prepper was originally one with which people wanted to avoid being connected. But as the decade wore on, more people became comfortable with being called a prepper. Now we still see that stigma now. We see it on the Prepper podcast. When I ask that question to people, are you a prepper? There is still kind of a stigma around the word. There's very little information about how many preppers are actually out there, obviously, because people think of OPSEC, and not everyone is willing to put it out there that they are a prepper. Despite the limited demographics research, it's clear that preppers are a big market. The poll of 2,000 Americans found that 65% owned or had recently purchased survival gear of some sort. Of these, 36% of them had spent up to $400 on survival kits in the previous 12 months. Another study by Global Biodefense estimates that between 4 and 9 million Americans are actively engaged in prepping. I mean, I'm pretty sure that number in the UK is going to be a lot lower, maybe a lot lower in that period between 2010 2020, but I think now, especially with the recent government advice, the way the world is, it's definitely the numbers are starting to really go up in the UK. And even if they're not a prepper, they have got a few bits put aside, and they do have the mentality of this could happen. which is half the battle, half a lot of the time, getting people to think along that wavelength. Traffic to prepper websites and communities has also exploded. A quick YouTube search shows how many prepper channels have more than 40,000 subscribers. I'm not one of them yet. Some have over 400,000, some have over 1 million subscribers. I'm definitely not one of them. You know, maybe you can help if you're watching and you're not subscribed. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Good opportunity for a little plug. And of course, we have Dan, who gets involved with the channel as well from start, prepping.co.uk, which is a website he set up, a non-profit website he set up to kind of help people that want to get started for the first time. And he's seen that spike in traffic as well, because we spoke to him about them analytics. On Facebook, there's numerous prepper groups with over 60,000 members. Some popular prepper pages on Facebook have over 100,000 followers. Most information shows that typical preppers are middle-class, white, conservative men. That's just the demographic. But I think, again, that has, over the last 3 years, started to change a lot. I think that's what it was. And it's the, you know, that kind of hobby that they would take on. But it's definitely all walks of life now. I think I genuinely have about a 50-50 split of female to male audience. So, yeah, that's interesting that they state that in the sources I'm using. I don't think it's that so much anymore. So philosophy of preppers often talk about self-reliance and self-sufficiency, and this is how it's somebody's duty to take care of themselves and to provide their own food. Now, that's probably less common over here than it is in the States because of purely the availability and the cost of land. You can be quite self-sufficient in your small house in the UK, but obviously, if you've got a homestead, it's a lot better. As the Centre for Critical Study of Apocalyptic and Millenarian Movements, or CENSAM, points out, these prepper philosophies are linked to traditional ideals upon which America was founded. Now, funnily enough, we were discussing this the other day on the Preppers Fireside, and it is very kind of that people who revert back to that kind of mentality and how America was founded and how they colonized and stuff like that is kind of where the prepper mentality goes to, with building a homestead and having a kind of mag in that kind of situation. Not so much for the UK. We would like to have mags and stuff, but it doesn't quite work out the same. That's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed this brief history on preppers and just to kind of get the idea of where the origins came from and kind of the direction we're going in. Hopefully doing a bit to get rid of the stigma that surrounds preppers. And yes, the lighting on my shirt has changed because the last video, the ending didn't quite record right, so I had to record it now. But hope you enjoyed it. Can't wait to see your comments on this one. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, consider becoming a member, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.